What simple mistake has ended lives? I read an article a long time ago about an aircraft maintenance worker not removing a piece of tape that was put in place to protect a sensor during cleaning. The pilot failed to notice during the pre-flight inspection. More than 100 people died in the plane crash. Archduke Franz Ferdinand's driver making a wrong right turn down a side street. World War I had a lot of simple mistakes that cost lots of lives. We're going into battle like we always do. Riding a horse, in full dress uniform, with all its colors, and large plumes, for better command and control. Leaving the stranded vehicle on the road in winter, and trying to walk to get help. It happens in rural parts of our province, once or twice a year, and they find the body a few days later. They get disoriented, and freeze. I grew up in Minnesota, and when I got my first car, during the winter, my dad told me, unless you can see the lights of a building, don't get out of the car. North Dakota winters. No car left our driveway without 40 pounds of kitty litter, 2 gallons of water, toilet paper, space blankets, candles, flashlight, and enough Snickers bars to keep you from dying. It was the 90s, we weren't perfect. Baby in the backseat. I'm in childcare, and I'll do some insane things to remember, there's a baby back there. Take my shoes off, put my phone back there, dirty diaper, as a reminder. People forget. It doesn't matter if you're a mom, nanny, father, nurse, firefighter. It happens. And yet, there's always someone who says, I'd never forget my baby. And every year babies die, because of it. That all heart attacks have the exact same symptoms. They don't. Trust yourself, and seek help ASAP, if you are afraid that you're having a heart attack. Women also tend to have different symptoms than men, so, it's good to be familiar with those. Women are much more likely to get less common symptoms, such as indigestion, shortness of breath, and back pain, sometimes even in the absence of obvious chest discomfort. My mom had very mild symptoms with her heart attack. She rated the pain as unimpressive. Her nurse coworkers dragged her to the ER. She's doing very well. Edited to add, this was a few years ago, so, I don't remember the clinical criteria that led to her being brought to cath lab. I'm very grateful to the doctors that took care of her. Mixing cleaning ingredients. My dad was trying to unclog his kitchen drain, and mix drain cleaners, by adding one, then adding another, a few minutes later. It started bubbling, and he began coughing intensely. I heard him coughing from the other room, saw what happened, and opened the nearby window, to get rid of the chlorine gas he just produced. I forgot there was a large hive of wasps that had moved into that window, and they did not appreciate this unexpected interruption. I took him to the emergency room for the gas exposure, and it was tough explaining that the wasp stings were not why we were there. The Goiânia accident. A court in Brazil had been made aware that there was an unsecured source of radiation in a condemned cancer treatment clinic, due to be torn down, but did not let anyone safely remove it. A scrap collector went into the building, found the radiation source, broke it open, and found glowing blue powder inside. No one knew it was extremely radioactive cesium powder, and the glowing blue light emitted by the powder was beautiful. It was spread around much of the local city, before reports of widespread radiation sickness prompted government emergency action. Multiple people died of radiation poisoning, including one 6-year-old girl. As an additional butthole clencher, the fire department very nearly threw the bag holding the remaining powder into the local river. Not having a carbon monoxide detector. As someone whose parents owns an HVAC company, this is a huge one. He has had people try calling the police when he condemned a furnace, calling him a thief and con man, when he is literally just trying to save them from flooding their house with carbon monoxide and dying in their sleep. The fact that people don't have carbon monoxide monitors is unthinkable to me. Mao's idea to get rid of sparrows. In short, China's great leader Mao had calculated that sparrows eat grain, and if China got rid of them, they would have more food. So, they did indeed decimate the sparrow population. They did not consider that sparrows eat lots of insects as well, which started to thrive, including locusts. The locusts ate the grain. Famine. Between 16 and 30 million people died. When he recognized his mistake, he asked the Soviet Union for help, and they secretly shipped sparrows to China. This is a bit a stretch though. Lots of factors led to the famine, lots of mistakes were made. But of all of them, this was probably the most obviously stupid one. A bit off topic, but still a funny/interesting story. Some time ago in India, the government awarded money for every cobra killed, to decrease the cobra population. As a result, people started cobra farms. When the government found out their plan failed, they stopped giving money for dead cobras. This led to all the farmers releasing their worthless snakes back in the wild. In the end, there were more cobras than before. Makes me think of a story I heard. I'm not sure if it's true or not. In the Dark Ages, when the church thought cats were spreading the plague, they had them killed, which led to rats thriving. Rats were the real carriers, so, without cats to keep their population in check, they spread it all across Europe. Not wearing a seatbelt. Same for helmets, on a motorbike. Quality helmets. My dad was wearing a cheap helmet when he had his accident. He lived for a week in a coma. Had he been wearing a better quality helmet, he probably would have lived. A friend's husband locked himself out of their home. He tried to get in through a window that had security bars. While squeezing through, his foot slipped, and he essentially hung himself on the windowsill. A friend of mine's stepmother died this way. Locked herself out, tried to climb in through a bathroom window, head first, lost her balance and fell, breaking her neck. Pulling the knife out of someone. Yeah, I did that, but it was a broken tree branch that had impaled my leg. Without even thinking, I pulled it out. Blood started gushing, so I pulled off my shirt and tied it into a pressure bandage. I was lucky I didn't bleed to death. Respected cardiothoracic surgeon tells a guy to stop smoking right outside the hospital doors. Guy turns around and punches him a single time in the head. King hit, or coward punched, whatever you want to call it. He falls to the floor and hits his head a second time. On life support for 4 weeks. Nothing left to save. People underestimate how easy it is to kill someone, even accidentally. Always treat a gun like it's loaded. Never point a gun at something you don't want to destroy. Never put your finger on the trigger unless you want to fire the gun. A really good friend of mine lost her brother that way. Guy was just cleaning his gun and didn't check to see that there was a round in the chamber. Not being honest with doctors about Viagra. It has many dangerous drug interactions and can cause a lot of problems, from what I've heard. Trust me, the doctor ain't gonna judge you, guys. They have seen much more embarrassing things. And it would suck to die because you wanted to hide something, just for it to be later stated in your death certificate. Not being honest with doctors. You could stop there. Seriously. Tell doctors everything, even that thing you think means nothing. I worked at a tire place for a summer, and the first thing they told me was, "See that torque wrench? One mistake with this, and you can kill a whole family in a matter of seconds." I thought, well, better take this thing seriously. There have been too many instances of rock climbers rappelling off of the ends of their ropes, which could have been easily avoided by tying stopper knots at the ends of their ropes. Bunch of guys were working on a LNG line, and when they cut over to the new line, the pressure regulator sensors were still on the old, disconnected, line, so the system automatically started to boost the pressure up, as it was sensing low pressure into the LNG lines, while the sensors continues to be on a completely isolated system, causing multiple houses to basically explode due to unexpected high pressure in the system. All thanks to some idiot town council wanting to save money by not having the proper professionals work on the system. I'm a firefighter in Mass. I responded up there on the task force the next day. We went door to door in darkness, forcing entry to homes to check for gas all night. Surreal being in a city you know no one and nothing about 40 miles from home, having to use cell phones to navigate around with and call for assistance, and nothing but a flashlight and floodlights on the truck to illuminate your way. People that didn't evacuate would pop out of the dark that you weren't expecting. There's a super famous example, which got made into a film eventually, I think, called Open Water. But the original story was a yacht was found sailing adrift, with a baby aboard, and no crew anywhere to be seen. No signs of panic were found. The baby was dehydrated, but otherwise fine. Eventually it was assumed that whilst at sea, they went for a swim. The sides of yachts stick out of water quite high in place, but on most boats the stern is lowered, so you can climb into and out of the yacht from a tender, small dinghy. This yacht was different and had a ladder lowered from the back. This was either up or missing. But they couldn't get back on the boat, and eventually drowned. or were attacked by predators. Now, I never jump in without thinking about this. Because you can't ever guarantee the person behind won't do the same. Imagine trying everything to get back to your screaming baby, mere feet away, and just being out of reach. It'd get dark. The wind might pick up and carry the boat away. Those final moments would be agony, from such a simple mistake. My Navy friend said, he heard a distress signal in the early hours of the AM, in the Atlantic, when it was still dark. He took control of the ship, and when they arrived 20 or so minutes later, all they found was debris. He beats himself up about it, because the girl sounded so distraught over the radio, the signal was blotchy and she was cutting in and out. They never found out who it was that was lost. My friend said, if you are in the middle of the ocean without any flotation device, that you only have 15 minutes or so before you succumb, due to hypothermia and the ensuing exhaustion. The Herald of Free Enterprise, not closing the bow door. 193 drowned. That is insane. Makes you wonder how someone messes up that bad. Poor passengers. The immediate cause of the capsizing was found to be negligence by the assistant bosun, who was asleep in his cabin when he should have been closing the bow door. However, the official inquiry placed more blame on his supervisors and a general culture of poor communication in Townsend Thorizon. Crew died too. Friend was having a beer in a tavern. Some guys came in and started messing with my friend. He moved seats twice and then got up to leave, when one of the guys threw a punch. My friend threw one punch back, and the guy he hit landed in the ICU and wasn't expected to live. Friend was sitting in jail, just waiting for the guy he punched to either die or recover. Turns out, the guy he punched recovered. Friend took a reduced charge of aggravated assault, a felony. One punch. Some homeopathic medicine for babies still contain deadly amounts of belladonna. Some babies died. Apparently, they did not dilute it as extremely as they were supposed to in homeopathy. Theric 25, the world's deadliest software error, cost several radiation patients their lives by administering lethal amounts of radiation, and for a while, the doctors didn't even know. Theric 25 suffered a particularly vexing sort of error, known as a race condition. Essentially, the circuit required multiple inputs in a particular sequence, but sometimes the timing of that sequence could get thrown out of whack, and it would lead to all sorts of nonsensical output. This is less than ideal, when all you're doing is manipulating pixels, but when your software is handling radiation beams, you really don't want this to happen. Even more vexing is that race conditions are frequently Heisenbugs, which can vanish altogether when one attempts to study them. If you don't have a good idea of what's causing the error, you may never cotton on to what sort of bad input is required to test it. Under those circumstances, it's easy to write them off as imaginary, only to then find basing test dummies on the proportions of the average man. Many women and children have died in car crashes because the seatbelt is up too high across their body, or the airbag hits at the wrong angle, because it was designed to expand to accommodate a taller person. Just wish someone figured out, not everyone is the same size, before people died. Back when I was in middle school, we had a carbon monoxide leak on a state testing day. Someone was supposed to test for carbon monoxide over the weekend, but the guy showed up at the high school, and not the middle school, and they ended up having to reschedule the whole thing. When they found out about the leak, everyone was in the middle of state testing, and they didn't want to evacuate the classrooms. Plus it was raining. So, they held a shelter in place and tried to handle the situation, since it was in a room away from the classrooms. But then kids started passing out in the classrooms, and vomiting and stuff. Several ambulances, 2 hours in the rain, and several school buses taking us all to stay in the elementary school building later. 3 students and 1 teacher's assistant died, and over 30 students ended up in the hospital. My mom came and got me from the elementary school, and took me to the hospital. I was okay, but I went home and passed out for almost 2 days. My mom was about ready to drag me back, but then I started to feel better. All around, effing crazy experience. My neighbor let his 15-year-old drive on the interstate coming back from a Florida vacation, because he was tired. He crossed the line, flipped the vehicle, and the entire family ultimately didn't make it. I could be remembering a similar but different story, but if it's the same one, I thought the kid driving survived, and his parents and I think sister were killed. Basically everyone but him. And wasn't it also nighttime? Edit. I remember hearing about the story I'm talking about, like not long ago either. Sometime, in the last 3 years. I once listened to a guy, telling the story of how, when he fell down the stairs, he desperately clutched onto the glass of wine he was carrying, in order not to break it, instead of grabbing the railing, to stop his fall. He survived with a broken hip, but I imagine, lots of people probably have the same weird instinct, and some may not be able to tell the tale. The Halifax explosion. December 1917, a ship with a hell of a lot of explosives, ran into another ship, that was traveling on the wrong side of the shipping lanes. An explosion the equivalent of 3 kts of TNT, killed nearly 2,000 people, caused a tsunami, and injured 9,000 people. Keeping in mind, the recent Beirut explosion, was close to 1 kt of TNT. Helmet. Funny anecdote, when Massachusetts passed a law, to require helmets on motorcycles, organ transplants went down significantly, because there were less deaths, in motorcycles accidents. They were, the best donors, young and died, because of a blow to the head, leaving other organs intact, often. Sadly, only New Hampshire cares about organ donations now. Sigh. Removing the weight from crush injuries after the 20 minutes has passed. Many people died due to poisoning. If they get the required injection, there's a far better chance of survival. Can you explain why? Just curious, I don't hear about stuff like that, often enough. When someone sustains a crush injury, it causes a large global area of cell damage. This causes cells to leak their cell contents. The most detrimental being K or potassium. This is trapped, until the object crushing the patient, is removed. Once the object is removed, circulation is restored, causing an increase in serum, blood, K levels. When serum K levels are elevated, since K is an electrolyte, you get serious heart electrical dysfunction. Calcium is given as a way to stabilize the heart muscle from the influx of potassium. Source: firefighter/EMT, paramedic student. In 1854, a woman named Sarah Lewis threw a diaper from her dying baby into a London cesspool, resulting in cholera killing 616 people, after it contaminated a popular well. Nigerian Airlines, Flight 2120, operated by Nation Air, departed Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, after a maintenance worker reinflated a tire with air, instead of nitrogen. The tire heated up, burst, and caught fire during the takeoff roll. The landing gear was retracted into the aircraft, and burned the aircraft from the inside out. The fire caused a mid-air structural failure, shortly before the pilots could return to Jeddah. My father's first wife was a flight attendant on that flight. Her, and 260 others died. It remains the most deadly aviation accident involving a Canadian airline. I looked this up and this is inaccurate. They didn't reinflate the tires at all, they just falsified that they did. There was no nitrogen available, so, they just ran them, underinflated. That's what caused the tires to heat up, and catch fire on takeoff. It wasn't a simple mistake, it was a serious breach of safety protocol. I was working alone and fell off a ladder, beside an empty shaft, where stairs used to be. I fell 20 feet off the ladder down the shaft. I caught myself on a railing, that had been left behind, and hit the floor below. I got off really lucky. I was bruised up, and it took about 20 minutes till I could get up. If that railing wasn't there, I was probably dead, because I would have fallen 2 more floors to the basement. Also saw a guy, who also fell off a ladder. He was 3 steps up, smashed his head and got perma-brain damage. Oily paint/staining rags will combust. Per the internets. Spontaneous combustion of oily rags occurs, when rag or cloth, is slowly heated to its ignition point through oxidation. A substance will begin to release heat as it oxidizes. If this heat has no way to escape, like in a pile, the temperature will rise to a level high enough to ignite the oil and ignite the rag or cloth. My dad worked in construction and this had happened on job sites, a time or two. Art student here. Someone threw away some old nasty rag that had years worth of oil paint and turpentine, used for thinning the paint down, and also for cleaning it off your skin, into the bin. Trash gets taken outside to the big can, which is sitting directly in the sun. One day, the thing effing exploded. Luckily no one was hurt, but it was insane. Blood transfusions not being screened for various diseases, but now is. With AIDS the problem was, that at first they didn't know how to detect it, or keep it out, and they weren't even sure, that it was transmitted by blood, in the first place. They quickly came up with a way to treat blood products, So, if there was anything, there it would be neutralized. In the meantime, they kept using the stuff that might have been contaminated, because it was either that, or nothing. The evil part came afterwards, when they had a new safe product and a stockpile of the old contaminated stuff, and the business people ignored what the science people were saying, and instead of destroying the stockpile, decided to sell it around the world. Grenfell Tower. Kensington and Chelsea Borough Council saved £5,000, $6,000, by not installing the slightly more expensive fireproof cladding, and instead used Rain-O-Bond PE, which, as described by one report, acted like solid petrol in the fire. This caused 72 deaths, and hundreds to suffer from homelessness, mental health problems, and trauma. A neighborhood kid I grew up with got his Honda all tricked out. He had an aftermarket remote start on it, back when those were rather new. Apparently, the remote start activated while everyone was asleep. I guess the theory was, he left the keys in his pants when he fell asleep. Car was in the garage. Entire household, parents, brother, sister, and Isaac, all died. My parents almost died, in a somewhat similar way. They were helping me clear out my house, to prepare it for sale, and came and visited. There was a major snowstorm, and I decided to hire some guy, off Craigslist, to shovel the snow off the roof. He got it done, great, I didn't have to use my giant snow rake or hop up there myself. Later that night, I decided to go out for drinks. It was only 10 to 11, and while I might have stayed out later, I decided to call it an early night. Got home, and the house smelled like gas and combustion, very familiar to me as a glassblower. They were just, I don't smell anything. I was very sure, and called the gas company. Gas company came over with their handheld detector and were tons of CO. Turned out, the guy shoveled all the snow off, without thinking of avoiding blocking the furnace output, and I didn't think of it. So, the gas heater exhaust was coming back into the house, as there was an 8-foot pile of snow over it. Turning on a gas stove, without checking that the pilot light is lit. I used to work at a restaurant, opened up one morning, basically sleepwalking. I turned on the gas stove first and it didn't light, which wasn't unusual. I slow walked around the kitchen, for about 45 seconds, going through the usual places I'd find fire, before I got something lit. I got about 5 feet from that stove, when I ignited a fireball. Stupidity. I worked at a place that had nightly cruises on the river, on weekends. Basically, a bar on a boat. A guy got way too drunk before the boat took off, and they kicked him off. He tried to jump on the boat as it took off. The current took him under, and he drowned. Taking a selfie. Oh yeah, someone IF told me about how his friend lost his lover, who went up the hill during winter, and then took a selfie on the summit. She dropped her hooks before taking a selfie. While she was posing for the camera, she tripped and started rolling down the slope. The guy managed to grab her, but he couldn't hold her, he let her go. Then she started rolling faster and faster down the slope. It's a very long slope and I can see it from my house. She must have been rolling at insane speed, before reaching the end, and falling down another 500 meters to her death. But she probably was dead, long before that. A man fell off the cliffs of Moher in Ireland, back in 2019, while trying to take a selfie. I remember hearing at the time, that he accidentally backed off the cliff edge, without looking. So many people don't realize the dangers of not paying close attention along the edge of those cliffs. When I was in elementary school, my friend tried a trend that was going around at the time called the choking game. His parents found him dead in his bedroom, a week after his birthday. I still miss him. Edit, the choking game took way too many young people's lives. Please, if any of you have younger siblings, or friends that are easily influenced, and you see a trend going around that could cause harm to your loved ones, reach out to them, make sure they are safe. Keep them informed of any dangers and risks they may take, by partaking in dangerous trends, such as the current TikTok trend, the Benadryl challenge. In memory, Zach, I miss you buddy. You were taken too soon. I wish you were still here with us. A family member of mine died, playing the choking game. His dad found him hanging from a punching bag in his room. A few years later, there was another death in the house, but this time it was a heroin overdose. Safe to say, I won't be staying there. Enrico Fermi was working on transuranium elemental discoveries, meaning, at the time, he wanted to see if he could make new elements heavier than uranium, by bombarding radioactive atoms with slow neutrons. He thought he discovered element 93, even won the Nobel Prize for it, but after further investigation, it was found that he got a few equations wrong, and had actually made a uranium atom explode. He accidentally discovered nuclear fission, the reason atomic bombs exist, all because of a few bad calculations.